All right. Welcome, everyone. We'll let folks log in, but I don't want to steal too much time. I'm Pat Reed at Cornell. I'm the facilitation team for the Multi-Sector Dynamics Community of Practice. It's my pleasure to introduce the latest installment in our 2026 webinar series, Advances in MSD-LIVE to support the MSD Community of Practice. In terms of the webinar, general rules, please be considerate, respectful, and collaborative. Keep muted unless a facilitator calls on you to speak. And we want to maintain a supportive and positive environment and respect questions and input from participants. I'm very happy to present our speakers, Casey Burleyson and Zoe Guillen. Sorry if I mispronounced that, Zoe. Happy to be corrected. And they're going to give you the latest updates for MSD-LIVE, which has a strong connection to the community of practice. Overall, the MSD community of practice, since 2020, we have been developing an effort to accelerate development of needed foundational capabilities in human Earth system science through open science and growing transdisciplinary workforce. As part of this, the community part of community of practice, you can join us in terms of newsletters and our web presence here, in terms of the website for multisectordynamics.org. And we also have a group on LinkedIn where we share posts and interesting research. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and pass to you, Casey.
Thanks, Pat. See if I can get this up. There we go. Can someone confirm that they can see my screen?
Yep, can see it fine.
Perfect. So thank you all for joining us. I see some familiar names on here, folks that I know and have worked with for a while, and then some new faces, which is super exciting. So really the goal of this webinar is to talk about MSD-LIVE and its connection to the MSD community of practice, with a particular focus on what new features are available in our version 3 release, which came out last September. So the way this will run is I'll spend maybe 15 minutes giving a little bit of background on the platform and highlighting what's new in V3. And then I've asked Zoe Guillen, who's one of our fantastic software engineers, to actually do some live demonstrations of the interactive data exploration features in the platform. As with all MSD-LIVE talks, this is really a team effort. So there's a lot of authors on here that have contributed to building the platform. And if you send us a help request or an email, these are the guys that are probably responding. And so all credit goes to the team as always. So Pat started by talking about, the community of practice and really MSD-LIVE and the community of practice. They've grown together over the last few years, really since its inception. So if we go back to this vision report that Pat led back in 2022, there's references throughout the vision report to using open science to really grow the community and facilitate people doing things better, faster, cheaper by leveraging open science and open science principles. And MSD-LIVE is a core component of that. So it wouldn't be an MSD-LIVE talk if I didn't show this diagram. This is my favorite diagram in the history of the world. This was a conceptual diagram created by Brian Nosek at the University of Virginia. He leads the Center of Open Science. And what he's getting at is all right, we can agree that open science is a good thing, but how do we actually make a transition to open science? And what Brian argues is that you start with foundational things like infrastructure. Literally, you make it possible to share data and code within a community. And then you layer on more complex things like an easier user experience, communities to make it normative, incentives to make it rewarding. And ultimately, you might think about something like policy to make it required. And when I see this, I think, journals, by mandating that you share your data and code, they really skipped to the top end of this pyramid, right? They made it required. MSD-LIVE and the MSD community of practice are tackling these foundational elements of the pyramid, right? Like we're really focused on what does it mean to make it possible to share data and code within a community of practice. So our vision is to build a cloud-based data management system and advanced computing platform. And it's really all about enabling researchers in the multi-sector dynamics community to document and archive their data, run their models and analysis tools, and share all of this data, software, and multi-model workflows within a robust community of practice. So it really is a cornerstone capability of the MSD COP. So that's the vision, but what does this look like in practice? When we started organizing MSD-LIVE back 7 or 8 years ago now, we spent a lot of time talking to members of the community, understanding what are the challenges that they face, finding data, sharing their data, and so on and so forth. And we came up with this list of 10 use cases. And it starts with really basic things like finding the data that you need to do your research, archiving data and getting things like data DOIs. And then it builds in complexity to like sharing data across collaborating teams that may be at different institutions, and more advanced computing needs, such as the ability to move the code to the data when the data becomes too large. So this list of 10 use cases, this is sort of our North Star, right? When I created this list, I literally printed it out and put it on the wall of my office, and I look at this, and this guides how we build the platform over time. So we started by building a data repository. We'll show you an example of that and what's in it and how to use it. And that really met a lot of the basic use cases there. And over the last few years, our focus has shifted to more of these advanced computing elements that we'll demonstrate today. These are really the core focus of our version 3 release. So when I look at the capabilities that are on the platform today, I think they really fall into sort of 3 main buckets. A data repository where you can archive data associated with your work or find data produced by others and get things like data DOIs. We also have a number of data dashboards that users have created where the data lives in MSD-LIVE, and then there's a dashboard through which downstream users can come and play around with that, explore the data, do different projections and different visualizations. And then the third bucket is these interactive model training and educational notebooks, of which I've linked to a few there, and I'll describe these more in a few slides. So if you go to our site, the data repository is one of the main features on there. It's a big tab that says data repository. And when you go to that tab, you'll find 2 different options. One is you can discover data. So that allows you to search data that's contributed by members of the community to the MSD-LIVE platform. I think we're at something like 190 data sets as of this morning. And that discover, we have faceted search. It's easy to find something when you have 10 data sets, but when you get upwards in 100 or 200, or in our case, in a few years, we'll be at 500 data sets, you really need these faceted search features to make it easier to find what you're looking for. So you can toggle things on like, is it a data set? Is it software? Is it a presentation? And you can also search by keywords. Some of the more prominent keywords are things like water, urban areas, energy, climate change, so on and so forth. So different ways to search what's in the data repository. The other tab is submit data. So if you are associated with a DOE-funded MSD project, you can join that project in MSD-LIVE, and you can use the platform to archive your data using that submit data button. So in terms of what's in there, like I said, we have 191 data sets out there right now. And you can see on the left tab there the different projects that have contributed those data records. And as with, the general trend is up and to the right here, right? This is a good thing. We're seeing strong use case of using the data repository and MSD-LIVE to archive data. Like our version 1 release was late in 2022. So the first metric that we took in January 3 years ago, we had 12 records. January 2026, we're up to 175. And our growth rate has sort of stabilized at about 30% per year for growing new data sets in the MSD-LIVE data repository. That growth rate is pretty consistent with what you would see in other leadership class data repositories there. We also have some metrics where you can look at like what are the most prominent data sets in MSD-LIVE. And there used to be a lot more variability in this when I would show this slide maybe 6 months ago. The leaderboard was made up of contributions by basically all the different projects. If you look at our leaderboard today, it's really dominated by IM3 and this series of data sets that the IM3 project created around an open source data center atlas and projected data center locations. Since those came out about 6 or 7 months ago, they've really driven a ton of traffic to the platform, people coming here to find that data set and download it. The canonical source there, the first version of the IM3 data center atlas just crossed 1,000 total downloads this past week, which is phenomenal engagement for a basic science research product there. We do track downloads on a daily basis there. That's what's shown in the bar chart on the bottom. And you can see, again, a lot of variability in there. You can see people took a Christmas break off, which I always find, I'm a data geek. So people did take a break for Christmas. Good on you guys for taking a pause. But in general, like we've had a lot of traffic to the site in the last 7 or 8 months. That's primarily been driven by this data center outlet. Moving on from the data repository, the next core feature are these Jupyter notebooks. And really, these are taking advantage of the cloud computing capabilities in MSD-LIVE to really facilitate training new people and teams to understand and extend MSD data and models. So MSD-LIVE is deployed on the AWS cloud, and the users have created these series of notebooks, and I'll show some examples here, where they take advantage of the computing and the cloud computing capabilities. So in these notebooks, they're typically oriented around like canonical MSD models like GCAM or state modify or some other classes of models like that. And the users will create a notebook teaching others how to run the model, configure the model, or analyze the output there. And these notebooks live on our site full time, year round. You can come and just access the link. When you click the link, it launches a computing instance in the AWS cloud where all the data and code is pre-installed on the back end, and the user can really go from starting to engaging with the model in under 2 minutes. And you can run most of these models in real time on the cloud and analyze their output. So when I think about this capability, it's really like it's a sandbox where people can come and play with these models. It's being used in classrooms around the country, and we're building this library of MSD models for people to come and learn and engage from. One of the examples of the use of these Jupyter Stack is the UC ebook. UC is uncertainty characterization. If you guys haven't seen this resource, I highly encourage you to check it out. This was developed by the IM3 team with lots of collaborators across the country. And they're using the interactive Jupyter notebooks to create tutorials to teach new users common uncertainty characterization workflows using MSD relevant sample data. So in the ebook, if you find one of these tutorials, you click the link, it'll spin up a cloud computing instance on demand. Everything is pre-installed, and then you can walk through the tutorial about how to execute these UC workflows. Another good example of the Jupyter notebooks is really the GCAM team and their use of this at their annual meeting. So I know a lot of you attend the GCAM annual meeting every year. It's coming up just next month in June. So if you haven't registered for that, I highly encourage you to check that out and register. The GCAM team has built a lot of these interactive notebooks to train people to use GCAM ecosystem models like Demeter, GCAM Wrapper, Hector, so on and so forth. And so at their annual meeting every year, we work with them behind the scenes to have these notebooks available to attendees at the meeting. And then during the meeting, they can use them, and attendees can run the models and analyze the output in real time. Last year at the 2025 meeting, I think we had 135 instances of users launching these model training notebooks and running them during the meeting. So this is an example of like a 2-day workshop, but these live on our site year round. So if you go to this link, our computational resources link, you can see all of these model training notebooks, and they're up there 24/7, 365 days a year. And so what this has really become is like a living library of MSD models that students from around the country, universities, even students overseas in places like China are finding the links and coming and learning how to run multi-sector dynamics models without having to go through the pain of installing them locally and everything like that. So it's really making it easier to entrain new users into our community and allowing us to scale that community over time. So I have just a few more slides before I talk about what's new in V3. People always want to know, like, is our platform being used? And heck yeah, it's being used. It's being used very heavily. All of our usage statistics are growing at about 30% per year. Excuse me. As of this morning, we had 368 registered users. I think this number is already out of date because I just approved 2 new users this morning from energy consulting firms coming to find data. 190 published data sets. We're sitting just under 200 terabytes of data in the system. And since we started tracking the use of our Jupyter notebooks in 2024, those have been launched over 2,500 times. So strong engagement from the community with the platform. All right, so let me pivot and talk about what's new in V3. And I'll give you a high-level overview here. And then I'm going to actually ask Zoe to give you a detailed walkthrough of how to use these features on our site. So the main new feature in version 3 that came out in last December is the ability to explore data sets directly on the cloud without having to download them. And by explore, we mean things like visualize, analyze, or subset the data directly in MSD-LIVE without having to pull it down locally. So this is an example of a data set in the image on the right there, created by the BSEC team. And you see this button that we added, explore the data. So Zoe will show you what happens when you click that button. But essentially, it creates a Jupyter notebook linked directly to the data set on the AWS cloud. And then you can use the notebook to play around with that data in the cloud. We also have the ability to create and share notebooks that you create with the community via GitHub integration, and Zoe will demonstrate what that looks like. And then finally, we because everything has to have an AI flavor now, we actually hooked an AI chatbot into this. So as you're working in the Jupyter notebook space, you can engage with that chatbot, which is trained on our help and documentation, and ask it questions like, how do I access this data path, or how do I import the Python library that I need, so on and so forth. So Zoe will show what that chatbot looks like. So when you launch the Jupyter Notebook instance, you would it looks something like this. And if you've ever used Jupyter, then you're familiar with this interface. On the left, we have different folders with links to where the data is installed and notebooks. And in this case, the notebook was created by the dataset authors. So when they uploaded their data to MSD-LIVE, they also uploaded a Jupyter notebook where they had prepackaged visualization or analysis code associated with that. Zoe will show you, if there's not a prepackaged notebook associated with the dataset, how to create your own and contribute that back. And then in the right, you see our AI chatbot there, where you can ask it questions of how to use the system. So Zoe will go into a lot more detail on these features and show you how to use them. The other thing that's new in MSD-LIVE, and we actually just turned this on this past week, is in the past, for the first 5 years of the platform, all users had the same permissions in the system. Meaning, if you signed up for MSD-LIVE, you got permission to use all the different resources. There were some challenges associated with that, particularly as we got this steady stream of new users that we weren't familiar with over the last few months coming to access things like the data center notebooks or the data center data sets. So in response to that, what we've rolled out is a tiered user permission system where we have 3 tiers of permissions. Tier 1 is just the ability to download data from the repository, use our command line interface, and request project membership. Tier 2 permissions would give you all those capabilities, but you would also have the ability to launch these educational or model training notebooks. So like all the GCAM ecosystem notebooks, you would need Tier 2 permissions to access that. And then Tier 3 is really the ability to use this dataset notebook feature that Zoe will be talking about here. We're not trying to gatekeep here, right? So if there's ability within the system, you are assigned a tier. We did that behind the scenes, but you can request an upgrade to Tier 2 or Tier 3. And when you do request that upgrade, we just ask that you provide a little bit more documentation about who you are, what institutions you may be affiliated with, and it makes it easier for us to verify who you are. But for lots of users that are just coming to MSD-LIVE to grab a data set, like the data center location data set, we can give them tier 1 access in like a minute, just by verifying their email address. So really, it allows us to get users access quickly while still maintaining that secure workflow for managing access to our cloud computing resources. So that's in V3. What's coming up in V4? Like, the platform is never static. We're always developing new features. In V4, which will be sometime later this year, we don't really have a date in mind just yet. We're working on an upgrade of our data repository infrastructure to the newest version of NVIDIA RDM. That'll unlock some features that we know you've been waiting on, like GitHub integration to facilitate DOIs for code. We've also been doing some work under the hood in RDM to allow you to do things like add images or figures into your metadata for the data sets. This is coming directly from the users. This is something that you asked for, and that's actually working now. We may roll it out before the V4 release, or we may wait on that. And then across the platform itself, the big new thing that we're working on is streamlining our documentation. As the platform has grown over the last few years, we've added many new features. Each of those has its own help and documentation. And we got feedback from the users that our documentation was becoming somewhat hard to navigate as it just became like longer and more complex. So we're using a read the docs framework to streamline that, make it easier to search and navigate our documentation so that you can figure out the fastest way to do things on the site easier. So we're hoping to roll that out soon. And then, as always, we're constantly doing like backend upgrades to align the platform with DOE's cloud security standards. So yeah, that's what we're actively working on now. But at this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm actually going to turn it over to Zoe, who can walk you through some live demonstrations of what's in version 3. Sorry.
Should we pause for any questions to Casey before I start? Are we ready to dive in?
That is a great point. I'm happy to take any questions.
No? They just want to see the demo.
I think they want to see the new and exciting stuff, which is
the fun part. Yeah. Okay, so this is the MSD-LIVE that I have, and I'm just going to jump right into our code and data repository. And I'm going to show you some records that have this new feature already turned on. It's called File Exploration, and you can search for them using our search page here. Checking the checkbox will show you only the records that have had this turned on, but I'm going to look for a particular record that I already know something about that'll make the demo a little more interesting. Okay, so this is our typical landing page for a record. The end user, and by the way, I'm going to just pretend for this part of the demo that I'm your typical downstream user, your data consumer. I go search and I find a record I'm interested in. I can read about it on this landing page about its metadata, but I want to dive in more and learn more about this data set by using this Explore the Data link, which Casey just showed. So when you click that link, I'm not going to click it now because I already have, so you don't have to wait the minute and a half. When you click the link, you have to log in. This logging in part is not new, but this third bullet here is new. We're just reminding everyone what tier you need in order to use this new feature. If you get an error saying you don't have the right tier, you can certainly go to your profile page and request an upgrade. So after you log in and your individual compute instance spins up, you'll be presented with this new Jupyter Notebook interface. Since we added so much to this new release, we've added a welcome tour as well. If you push the take tour, it's going to walk you through all the different or parts of the Jupyter Notebook interface and part of our customizations. I'm going to skip the tour because that would make the demo not as fun because I'm just going to show you them as they come along. Okay, so for this particular data set, The author has linked a GitHub repository and provided prepackaged code and this README. So that's one way whenever you enable this dataset exploration feature, if you provide your GitHub repository, we'll present users with this README explaining their notebooks and how to use them. So let me go ahead and go into this notebook folder and open this notebook. I'm going to go ahead and run all the cells too so that they can be executing while we look at it. So one of the features that Casey mentioned earlier with the notebooks, it lets users, well, the typical flow is installing your requirements that are done in a cell, and then you can import your dependencies like any other Python. This particular notebook is showing us a little snippet of the data so we can see what it looks like using this head. And then this notebook does some plotting of the data, which is really cool. But the one feature I wanted to point out that makes this a really powerful release is subsetting the data. Now, this particular data set is pretty light. It doesn't have a ton of data, but you can imagine other data sets that cross a ton of spatial or temporal times. And if a downstream user like me, I'm only interested in the last month or a particular month, this subsetting example shows a birthday. If you want only to know weather stations around your birthday, you can enter in how you want to slice and dice your data. And then after all the analysis is ran and you get some cool viz, the subset of data is now saved as its own CSV file. This particular CSV file is super small and there's only one file. So after you've done your subsetting, you can right click and download the file so you can access it. But we also added the ability for users to download some set of data whenever it's not super small, or if it's a whole directory structure full of thousands of files. It would be really difficult to do with this interface. Or if you want to download the data to some other system that doesn't have a browser, like your institution's compute. And that, in order to do that, you would use your Scratch directory. So that's this little button here with the cloud. Select whatever you want and then click that button, and whatever you've selected will be copied to your Scratch folder. And we let you know at the bottom when it's all done. This was really small, so it went really fast. And from your home folder in your compute environment, you can see what's in your Scratch directory. And there it is now. Again, you can right click on here and download, but the real powerful feature of the Scratch directory is that you can use it. You can download files that are in your Scratch directory from our CLI. This particular notebook has a link to how you can download from your Scratch directory using the MSD CLI. I'll click it and show it. And here's a little demo of how to do it. Basically, after you install our CLI, you run the command download Scratch. So that's how you can get that whole output folder that was created with the subsetting routine over to your compute, however you need to get the data. Then another use of this Scratch directory is that you will also notice down here on the bottom status bar of my Jupyter Notebook, we have a session limits implemented in Notebook, and you only have 1 hour once you launch your dataset notebook to complete your work. If you're really into it and you're slicing and dicing, super having a lot of fun, and you start getting bummed out about your session time running out, another good use of your Scratch directory is you can use that to copy your work in progress, your notebooks that you're currently working on, or your partially subsetted data, your in-between data. Copy that over to your Scratch directory. When the session runs out, relaunch, and then you can go to your Scratch directory and copy anything back out, as long as you copy it into an area where you have write access, which is in your home folder. So that is the Jupyter Notebook, or the dataset notebook feature, from the perspective of a dataset that has a linked GitHub repository. And up here, I'll show you, this is the GitHub repository that particular notebook has linked, the README, and then the weather station data notebook. And I'm going to stop sharing for a minute to share my other browser that I've launched a notebook that has not linked the GitHub repository. And while I do that, I can pause for a minute in case there's any questions.
Yeah, I think that's a great example, Zoe. And in that example, like we're talking about really small CSV files that are sort of trivial to subset. But you can think about the potential of this if the data set is much, much larger, think hundreds of gigabytes large, and you may not want to pull it down locally, right? Like you may only need part of that. So you can use these Jupyter Notebook environments to go in and write your subsetter or execute a subsetter provided by the dataset authors, and then just pull down what you need without having to grab the whole thing. That's really the power of this.
Okay, and then now I've got on this other browser another data set that does not have where the author has not provided already prepackaged notebooks or README. They just clicked a button in our system saying, yes, turn on file exploration, and that's all they did, which is totally fine to do. And on the other tab here, I've already launched that environment, and you'll see it looks slightly different. There's no README that is opened whenever the notebook launches because the author didn't provide a README. And so you might be wondering, well, what do I do? I don't have a README. There's no prepackaged notebooks out here. What would be the point? So what our downstream users can do is they can create their own notebook. I just right-clicked in this area and selected new notebook. We've added this option to create notebook with starter code just because we feel that it would be handy for people to have some starter code to see how they interact with this data set's data. So when you do that, this is just giving you a little template to start off with so you can get started with how do you install dependencies and import them. The two cells toward the bottom are the ones I wanted to point out. This cell will show you how you access the data that in your data set in order to read in that data like you would as if you had downloaded it locally. It's the same sort of library encoding that you would do had you downloaded the data and ran the notebook locally. And to do your analysis and subsetting. The collaborative features that Casey pointed out, I'm going to go ahead and save this notebook, and we'll just pretend that it's really cool. Let me go save. I'm going to call it a cool viz. We'll pretend it's really cool, and I want to save it. And it's so cool that I think other people in our MSD-LIVE community could really benefit from this notebook that I've tailor made to work with this dataset's data. You'll see at the top of our file exploration area here, this pull request button. Now, when I click this pull request button on this notebook that the user has not linked a GitHub repository, you might wonder where that notebook goes. And so for this particular use case, we've included, or for this release, we've included the concept of an MSD-LIVE community dataset notebook GitHub repository. And that is where these notebooks are going to go and live. And anytime downstream users or anytime downstream users launch this same Jupyter environment with this data set, once this PR has been approved by us MSD-LIVE admins, and we only approve it for security purposes, once the PR is approved, then anyone else that were to launch this same data set, file exploration notebook, they will have access to this notebook. I was going to pause there, Casey, in case you want to do any more explanation for that.
No, I think this is really cool, and it's a way for as users develop new visualization routines or subsetting routines for data that lives in MSD-LIVE, this is the mechanism through which they can just share that back, right? And then it's there for all downstream users that come and find that the same data set, they can launch this and pull up the notebooks created by others, so that they don't have to reinvent the wheel and write, analysis or visualization or subsetting from scratch. So I think it's a really powerful feature there.
And then two more features, and then we'll open it up to discussion and questions. The one other thing in this environment that I wanted to point out was this other data sets folder. I have a quote from right after we released, and I think Casey said, September of the dataset notebooks in general. We had two of you, or I don't know if everyone's on, if both people are on the call, but in general, two users that had the same exact kind of question. Like, this is really, really cool. Now, what if I want to compare or visualize data files from multiple data records? Is it possible to access files on another record from the Jupyter Notebook instance? So it's like, oh, look at this really cool environment we got you guys. And then immediately, I want more. We want to do multiple data set analysis at the same time. So we did it. So here in this other data sets folder, you'll see all of our MSD-LIVE data sets that have turned on this file exploration feature, whether or not they linked a GitHub repository. So some of these might have already provided notebooks and READMEs, but most have not. And in order to do some kind of comparing with two or more data sets or co-visualizing of two or more data sets, you can use this path that is other underscore data sets with the dataset ID in the path in order to access multiple data sets in the same compute ecosystem. In this last code block in our sample notebook, we'll show you how to do that. Okay, so that was a really cool feature. We're going to call it our data lake. And last, we have our chatbot, and we have some sample questions you can ask it. And the very first time you ask our chatbot a question, it takes a moment to warm up. And because demo gods are always a little cranky, we had to fix something last minute yesterday before the demo when we realized that the chatbot was not totally working. And so I noticed when I was trying this yesterday that sometimes this can take a really long time and sometimes I have to start it over again. And we already have plans when we were working on this yesterday on making this way better, including having it work. Let me see if I can just open it. Right, it's indexing and it's searching our old documentation site. I'm going to just try this again because that one part is not working. I ask again, how do I import import dependencies? It's going off our old documentation, which we've linked this on our website, but this is what Casey showed earlier in his screenshot. It's got way better documentation and explanations and screenshots for how to use some of these new features. So we'll be switching over to that soon, and then our chatbot will be working a lot better. And look, it did work better the second time. So anyways, we have listed up here some of the questions that you can ask it as you're working. It can help you with your code if you want to need some help learning or writing how to subset or visualize some data, or it can help you with the particulars of this environment. Like it knows about the Scratch drive and how to use it. So if you get lost along the way, you're welcome to ask it questions. And that was the last thing I was going to demo. So I'm going to leave it open to Casey and others to chime in or ask questions.
Yeah, thanks, Zoe. And this other data sets feature, this is another example of like this came directly from the community, right? Like when we rolled out the dataset notebooks in V3, people came to us and said, can it do this? And we figured out how to do it. So now MSD-LIVE is a data lake where what you see in that other datasets folder are all the other datasets that have turned on the interactive data exploration feature. You do have to turn this on for your dataset. We don't do that for you. But if you need help figuring out how to turn it on, we can walk you through that. But you know, all of the data sets that have it turned on are now available in this compute environment to the downstream user.
Chris has had his hand
yeah,
up.
I see it. Zoe, can you answer Chris's question in the chat? Can you see that?
I will try. Maybe I need to reshare or unshare.
Chris, you can unmute and just ask your question if you want.
Okay.
Sorry.
No problem. So I was, and again, sorry if I missed this, but so can you download the subsetted data? So for instance, if I read into a data frame, I want to pipe that out to a Parquet file to bring in locally from just the subset that I'm working with, or some other derived piece of a workflow that I'm doing in this notebook here. Is that possible to do?
Yep, let me open this up in the type. This is our old documentation site. We have it in the new, but in our current website, let me scroll up a little bit. On our MSD-LIVE website, if you go dataset notebooks, you'll be presented with a page, and then on that page, there'll be some links. On one of those links at the bottom of the page, I can put it in, is a video. Let's see. Where is it? Scratch directory. Oh, here it is, downloading. So once you put things in your Scratch directory, wherever you have the MSD-LIVE CLI installed, or if you don't have it installed, you can install it. You run this MSD-LIVE download Scratch command, and everything that's in your Scratch directory will be downloaded into the output directory that you specify in the command.
That's great. And does that come piggybacked with the metadata for the citation? So like the source data sets, is that available when you download subsets?
Whatever you download is only what you've put in your Scratch directory. So it's going to get anything. Well, this is a different user. So if I were to put community notebooks, it's only going to get what you put in your Scratch directory. So it's meant for the purpose of is for downloading your subsetted data or
Okay.
your work in progress. Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you so much. I would, to that end, I think something maybe helpful would be like a metadata.json file that hangs out in your Scratch folder that has the source citations or the DOI from the data you're using in the notebook. So you can cite even the subsetted data without going back. But just, this is great though. Thank you so much.
Yep.
That's an interesting idea, Chris. I don't know that we've thought about, but I mean, that's sort of making the data AI ready on the back end, right? The subset. If you include the metadata when you download it in some way or form, then it makes it easier for a downstream AI to understand the provenance.
Yeah, that's right. Especially if you feature engineer directly from this notebook and you're making it available. Yeah, that'd be a pretty useful element to this as well. But yeah, great work.
Good
I
idea.
love it.
Yeah.
Happy to take
What other?
questions from folks. Go ahead, Casey.
I was just going to ask, what other questions do people have?
I mean, one thing maybe you and Zoe can talk to a bit relative to other repos. MSD-LIVE has a pretty unique capability to deal with some of the larger data sets, and with the Jupyter notebooks, this seems to make that even more flexible and manageable. So I guess that's me inviting you all to talk a little bit about sort of the scale of the data sets that you're demonstrating and some of the unique features of MSD-LIVE relative to other repos.
I mean, when we created the name 7 years ago, whatever, live was intentional, right? Like we didn't want to build just a data graveyard where people can come and dump their data and then downstream users can download it maybe, but there's no way to interact with it. So the living was intentional, and this is what we mean by a living data repository. We do know we talk to people in the community. The data sets aren't getting smaller; they're only getting bigger, right? Lots of climate model output, or even some of the sectoral data sets these days are getting just quite large. And so it becomes challenging for downstream users to figure out, all right, like is this a good use for is this a good fit for purpose for my research without having to download like 2 terabytes of data to figure that out, right? So if there is data in MSD-LIVE, they can come and they can spend an hour playing around with it, and maybe it's a good fit, maybe it's not, but like they're not sinking that time to download the whole massive thing. Like you can be up and playing and visualizing the data in minutes now instead of waiting days for it to download locally only to figure out it doesn't meet your use case. For the data set sizes, there is some things that are happening on the back end. Right now, if your data set is smaller than 500 gigabytes, when you enable that data set exploration feature, we're making a copy of that to AWS's EC2 instance. And that it's just for performance reasons. Like if you read from EC2, it reads a lot faster in these interactive compute environments. If your data is larger than 500 gigabytes, then we encourage you to work with us directly, and we'll figure out the most optimal way to do read from S3 directly. It's a little bit slower. It's not as performant, but there's ways to work around that. And so when you go into our data repository in the help, you'll see that, if it's larger than X, reach out to us and we can work with you on that. One of our suggestions may be to recommend that you use like a cloud native format like XAR for your data, just because it is more performant when reading directly from S3. Jillian?
Hi, Casey. Hi, Zoe. Thank you so much for the presentation. I just wanted to check how, and I'm sorry if I've asked this before, is MSD-LIVE pretty friendly to geospatial data? And it's kind of to your point specifically, like if it's a larger geospatial data set, what are your recommendations of that?
I don't know why it wouldn't be. Zoe, do you know of any behind the scenes reasons why it wouldn't be?
No, the one thing we were going to mention, I think we have a data set coming that's going to be uploaded to MSD-LIVE soon that is in XAR format. So the large data sets, and I can check Casey right now, our quota for copying to EFS drives are 50 gigabytes of fluid. We can change it. So if you have a very large data set, what we recommend is uploading it to a cloud native format like XAR, and you can still totally use this notebook environment to subset and visualize your data. And there's lots of support for that. Or if you were to Google and use chatbots to help you write the code for subsetting and visualizing data in cloud native formats like XAR. So if it's under 50, you can upload it in whatever format that you're most familiar with and that you know how to already write your Python notebook on. Over 50, in order to use this capability, it needs to be some kind of cloud native format that the notebook can take advantage of.
And
But
what
yeah,
I would say
Thank you
is
so
like
much.
reach out to us and ask.
Yeah.
Like there's all kinds of contact buttons on our site where like we're more than happy to figure out how to work with you on your specific use case. Like this happens a couple of times a month. We'll have a user come out and say, "Hey, I'm trying to do this. Can you help us?" And usually we can do it over email. Sometimes we help on a call, but reach out to us and we're happy to help.
All right, thank you so much.
Other questions or thoughts?
Actually,
Yeah, go ahead, Pat.
just can you say a little bit more about the technical engine of your chatbot?
Sure. Actually, I think Karina Lansing is still on the call. I'm going to let her talk your ear off about chatbot because she's all about it.
Hello. Yeah, we leveraged a RAG-based chatbot that we use for ARM. And RAG is retrieval augmented generation. So instead of requiring the LLM to use its own knowledge to answer a question, you search your knowledge base and provide the knowledge to the LLM, and then it answers a question based on the knowledge that you provided. And that can be tricky in big, huge systems like ARM because there's so much documentation. The key challenge is in the retrieval part is selecting the most important and relevant information that you want the LLM to use. So if you don't select good information, you'll get bad answers. We discover, and so we just, but of course, being able to select things properly can require like more complicated pipeline, and it uses actual other models to be able to like infer intent from the question and all this other stuff. Well, we just copied the template over from ARM, but it was way too heavyweight as Zoe said, for this little tiny little chatbot for MSD-LIVE, because we only want to search our MSD-LIVE help, which is so small that it's so small, we could just include all of the help in one single context, the LLM. So we don't need any big pipeline or some of these other techniques like reciprocal rank fusion and cross encoding that was very important for ARM. We don't need it. So it is just making this run slower. Also, we're using a good LLM, but not the most expensive LLM. We found, because we want something that can be used and not going to cost a lot of money. So for our ARM testing, we used the same model, same LLM, and it was only costing a few dollars a month for everybody. So it wasn't very expensive. So we felt like it was a good, first pass chatbot, but we can make this like way faster because we're just going to get all the pipeline and just send our help to the LLM and it should be able to answer the questions really quickly. But we have other, I've been doing other types of AI assistance for ARM, including, agentic AI and being able to use tools and help answer questions. And do, solve problems. So there's definitely more we could do. If people like the idea of having the chatbot inside of the notebooks, there's definitely more we can do to include like the actual notebook context with the information that we send so that you can answer, it can more intelligently help you work with the code that you're currently working on in the notebook. Right now, if you want it to help you write some code for your notebook, you have to, in the chatbot, you have to tell it about the data you have. You have to copy paste any existing code you have and say, fix this. If it was context aware, we could send this automatically and you don't have to do a bunch of copy paste. So there are things we could do to improve it. But right now it's just going to be basically a really simple RAG chatbot that lets you answer questions. Not only we'll leverage the LLM for general coding questions and Python questions and Jupyter Notebook questions, but specifically MSD-LIVE specific information, we're just going to be using our help, like Zoe said. And the one good thing about doing these is it becomes clear really quick if you have bad documentation in your help. It's like, why did it answer that way? You're like, oh, well, we didn't explain that very well. So it's actually the process is helping us to refine the help. And so this new version, I think, will be a lot better.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I've been generally impressed with its ability to provide direct answers by searching the help. Like as I said, the help is something we realized we need to streamline because it was just getting quite bloated. The new version using this read the docs template should be a lot easier there, but the chatbot helps. The other thing I noticed on Zoe's screen there while Karina was talking was she got a timeout warning. So we do currently have this set up. The dataset notebooks, they time out after an hour. This is something that's configurable. So if you guys are playing around with this and you're figuring out like this isn't working or like my use case probably requires a longer time, come back to us with that feedback, right? Like we had to set something in the system so that people don't just leave these things turned on overnight because it does cost us some money when they're up and running. But if an hour isn't the right answer, let us know and we can think about adjusting that there.
And I logged in to MSD-LIVE, and on a record that I'm starting to fill out the metadata for, you'll see this new file exploration section with the yes, no button. And this will walk you through setting up your prepackaged code that is a GitHub repository. So when you click that button, it'll authenticate you as your GitHub user, help you create that repo using a template. And I was wrong. So I think somewhere else I saw it. So we do 500 gigabytes. So if your data set is 500 gigabyte or less, the data that is available in this compute instance is here in this data folder, and the code that you write in your notebook to access it is just normal file IO code same code you would write if you had the data locally.
Final thing I'll say about the compute instance up here, like this is connected to some pretty powerful computers on the cloud. You should assume if you're using MSD-LIVE to do compute on AWS that we're aware of what you're doing in the system, and you should use it appropriately. Yeah.
All right, we're at the top of the hour. So thank you, Zoe. Thank you, Casey. Folks can follow up if you have questions and go play with MSD-LIVE and the new functionality and the cool chat bot support. So thank you all. Have a good day. And stay tuned to, we have other 2026 MSD-LIVE webinars that are going to be coming out in June, July, and August. So thank you.
Thanks for facilitating, Pat, and thanks to everyone for chatting. Have a good day.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. Bye.